And we are live. Good morning from beautiful downtown Crestline in the San Bernardino Mountains of Southern California's Inland Empire, where we have June gloom. Hi, Jason. Good morning and welcome in. I'm about 5 minutes early today, so I'll just noodle around giving people time to come on in. It's sunny, but kind of overcast and cold. It's about 65 Fahrenheit. 72 is room temperature, so we've got a ways to go. But we have comfortable afternoons, around 70 degrees. The forecast says we'll get some heat coming back in, summer heat over the weekend. Oy, poor Jason, it's 104, or going to be 104 today in Scottsdale, Arizona. Yeah, I spent a miserable few days, maybe a week, in Scottsdale in June. My son was graduating from motorcycle school. Welcome in, Pio. Anyway, my shoes actually melted. I stood still too long on the pavement. My rubber-soled tennis shoes melted. Jeez. I'm glad I'm in the mountains. I'd rather put up with some winter weather than having my shoes melt. Although I'm told it gets pretty cold in the winter in Arizona. Okay, 2 minutes till 8. Well, man, so much is happening. Our military bombed some nuclear facilities in Iran, and Iran and Israel agreed to a ceasefire, but they kept shooting anyway. President Trump said the F word. He said they don't know what the F they're doing. Oh, Freeman, welcome in. Yeah, my shoes melted. Rubber-soled tennis shoes, what do they call them now? We always called them tennis shoes. Or boat shoes. Well, anyway. Oh, poor Theo losing his job. That sucks. I wish I could work. Sneakers, huh? Yeah, we call them sneakers sometimes. I think they've got a new word for them, and I don't remember. Well, licor de citara. Welcome in. I'm not sure what licor de citara is. Let me look that up. Translate licor de citara. Something fell on my lap. Yeah. What a mess. I don't know what it was or where it went. There, here we go. Sitar liquor. Okay, what is sitar? S-I-T-A-R. Okay, what is sitar liquor? Corn liquor. Well, in Europe, that can mean American corn or maize, or it can mean any grain such as wheat or rye. Huh. You wanted a topic today, Freeman? Ah, Pio drew some doodles. Good. A topic? June gloom. Well, I didn't want to tell YouTube anything today. They always find some excuse to oversee my rambling conversations. I don't know why. I'm harmless. Freeman sent me a video link. I haven't watched it yet. I've been ill. First, the itching. I had an itchy rash on my left arm, which is a continuing reaction to a certain treatment that was offered for free to everyone, especially seniors in 2021. Shot in the arm. So I put anti-itch lotion on and discovered that I am severely allergic to aloe vera. And it's in everything. I had to spend quite some time and effort trying to find an anti-itch cream that does not contain aloe. But I've also had stomach upset and fatigue. But yesterday I managed to do some laundry. I was completely out of clean clothes that actually fit me. Ah, liqueur is Mexican and it means something special. A sort of wine made out of music. That's lovely, liqueur. And most of the creams don't state clearly that they contain aloe. They hide it in a long list of inactive ingredients in teeny tiny print. So I had to look them all up on the internet. Ah, it's Sequentia. Welcome in. We got a full house here. Excellent. I don't want to start a revolution. Remember the old Beatles song, "We don't want a revolution, you know. We don't want to change the world." Anyway, I don't know that song very well. Just the tempo is awesome. The 60s were a time when tempo, the timing, the drum beats became so important in popular music. Anyway, I found one. It's a Benadryl cream. It does not have cortisone, which I always trusted as a anti-itch medication. It doesn't have that. It has Benadryl, which is an antihistamine. So I hope it works. I haven't received it yet. I couldn't find it in the stores, so I ordered it online. The course says there's a painting by Remedios Faro where she depicts herself owl-like as an alchemist. The owl is very important in the iconography of Philip K. Dick. He was going to write a novel called The Owl in Daylight, but Unfortunately, he passed away without ever writing it. Yeah. Well, see, there's an old Southern phrase, Southern U.S., that is, that if you're like an owl in daylight, it means you're blind, mentally blind. Most owls cannot see in bright light. Their eyes are designed for the dark. Mm. So, anyway, the thumbnail for this, for today's live stream is Phil with our cat Pinky and kind of dolled up a bit. I used to have a program on my computer that would edit images, but it doesn't work now because it isn't compatible with the new um, forgot the word, the Windows that doesn't have DOS, and they keep changing it. Every time I learn how to use it, they insist on upgrading to a new version of Windows. Anyway, I see Freeman and Etsy Quenty are discussing rock and roll groups. This danged basal cell carcinoma is driving me nuts. And I don't get to see the dermatologist till August, and then after that I'll probably have to go through the ringer to get surgery scheduled. Phil gave two different plots for The Owl in Daylight, one in an interview that was published as, I forgot the title of the book, but it's by his good friends Doris Sauter and her friend, whose name I can't come up with at the moment because I'm not prepared. I think it's called What If Our Earth Is Their Heaven? But I'm not sure. That might be a different book. And he also wrote a letter to either his agent or his publisher, in which he described a different plot. But it was basically that a great computer scientist would be caught inside his own computer program. And I think he was inspired by the trailers for a movie that had not yet come out. The movie was called Tron, Tron. Anyway, whatever. So let's see. Trump said the F word. He negotiated a ceasefire between Israel and Iran, but they've broken it, of course. NATO is still funding Ukraine, but we aren't hearing much about that because of all the missiles dropping in the Middle East. Yeah, the Matrix, of course. The two guys who created the Matrix stated publicly they were inspired by Phil's work. Well, thank you, Licor. You've read some of my books. Awesome. My best novel so far is The Darkening of the Light. And it's been reissued in a second edition by Quoir, Quoir. They claim I have some royalties coming, but I haven't seen them yet. It's probably not much. Yeah, I believe that the creators of The Matrix should have been sued, but I'm not in charge of that. And the lawyers for his estate said no. But that's how it goes. See, Hollywood has more lawyers and more money to fund a lawsuit. The Matrix, well, it at the very least is a metaphor for the way we live now. Most people, over 90% of people, even in the US, live in poverty. And it's because they're being cheated by their own government and by large corporations. Well, I was going to talk about SolarCon 6 today. This is how Phil interpreted something he heard on the telephone. He figured it was some kind of code word. One of my favorite movies is Inception. A woman keeps experiencing the future before it happens. She's unstuck in time. Yeah, The Truman Show, The 13th Floor, Dark City, The Matrix. Oh, welcome in, Jonah. Yeah, there were all kinds of artificial reality movies around the same time as The Matrix. Well, anyway, before I met Phil, so I know only what he told me. He was living in San Rafael, a small city in Marin County, which is north of the San Francisco Bay. And his wife Nancy left him. And moved in with a gentleman basically right down the street, close by. But her younger brother Michael stayed in Phil's house. And Michael then would have been either a teenager or in his early 20s. I'm not sure. But of course, Michael's friends would come to visit. And the sheriffs became suspicious of Phil for having all these young people hang out at his house when he was 40 years old. They just assumed that he must be selling them drugs. Well, of course he was not. He had no idea how to get drugs, except from his doctor. So anyway, one older man, older than 20 at least, probably around 30 to 40 years old, was also hanging around, and he was filling Phil with information about spies and underground organizations like Black Panthers and communists and all kinds of stuff, all kinds of radical groups. He called himself Hal Kinchin, but that's probably not his real name. And he actually took the back off of Phil's television set and showed him that there was a camera inside that was watching everything that happened in Phil's living room. Remember, television sets were these big boxes. They were not flat screens. And Hal claimed to be an agent for a U.S. government agency that was so secret that even the CIA did not know about them. This would have been around 1969 to 70. Yeah, a Scanner Darkly. Oh, hi, Jonah. Welcome in. Yes, A Scanner Darkly was partly based on Phil's real experiences. So, Phil was getting more and more nervous and what he himself called paranoid, because there would be cars parked across the street for hours just watching his house, and he figured they were undercover police. And one day in 1971, Phil and his girlfriend Stephanie Hal called Phil and asked him to meet at a certain coffee shop. So Phil and his girlfriend Stephanie set out to meet with Hal. And Phil realized suddenly that there were two of that. It was a chain of coffee shops, and he wasn't sure which one of the two Hal was talking about, but he had no way to call Hal back. I guess he phoned and didn't get an answer. So they took off in the car. It was a Pontiac, and I think it was a convertible. You know, you could take the top down. Um, and on the freeway, the car broke down. And they had to wait and wait and wait for a tow truck and then find a way to get back home. They got a taxi. And by the way, the next morning, the mechanic told Phil that the car had been sabotaged. Something had been done to the carburetor to cause it to break down. When they finally got back in the taxi cab refused to drive up to their house. The driver let them out on the corner, and they had to walk down to the house. So the taxi cab driver knew that something was going on. And when they got there, they found that the house had been invaded. The front door was forced open, even though they had not locked it. They never locked it. Doorknobs were knocked off of doors inside and outside of the house. In Phil's office, there was wet white powder all over the floor, and his fireproof file cabinet had been blown open with explosives. It was not a safe, it was a file cabinet, and he had not locked it. They could have just opened it. Very little of value was taken. He had an expensive wristwatch and some cash and gold coins sitting out in plain sight. They were still there. But his bank statements and tax records were taken, and his manuscripts were taken. He had sent a copy of the manuscript for Flo My Tears, the policeman said, to his lawyer in his divorce case just for safekeeping. But the other book, and I've forgotten the title, it'll probably come to me, but the other one he was writing, both the top copy and the carbon copy were taken, so that book never got published because they took his manuscripts. Well, his reaction was, "Thank God I'm not paranoid. They are out to get me." Anyway, oh, that's what it was. When he tried to call Hal to find out which coffee shop to go to, Hal picked up the phone and said SolarCon 6 or something that sounded like that. So Phil hung up. That's why he didn't know which coffee shop to go to. Yes, November 21 of 1971. And every November, especially as it got closer to November 21, Phil would go into panic mode. He'd get more and more agitated, as if it might happen again on the anniversary of the first hit on his house. Well, so SolarCon 6, Phil kept trying to find out what that might mean. I figure it was just an identifier that Hal used to identify himself to others in whatever organization he was part of. So Phil was scheduled to be guest of honor at a science fiction convention in Vancouver, British Columbia. There's a Vancouver in Washington State, but this was in Canada, in British Columbia. So he sold his house. He had the realtor store his property and sell his house while he was gone. He didn't get much for the house, but it did cover the storage of his property and having it shipped down to him in Fullerton, Southern California, months later. Well, he decided to stay in Canada. He was afraid to return to the United States. And then, after the convention was over, he had rented an apartment. And he had a headache, so he walked down to the pharmacy where he could buy some pain pills. I can't remember the name of the medication. It was something that was non-prescription. You could just buy it over the counter in Canada. It was one of the date rape drugs, by the way. But before he could get to the pharmacy, two men wearing black suits shoved him into the back of a black limousine, and with these two men, one on each side of him, they drove him around Vancouver at night. And they went through what Phil called the blue light district. I would call it the red light district. It's, where all the illegal gambling and prostitution takes place. That part of town. And they were talking to him and asking him questions, but he couldn't remember what they said or even what he himself said. But then he woke up and he was sitting on the floor in his apartment, not knowing how he got there. But there was this bottle of pills and a glass of water, and apparently he had swallowed most of the pills. if not all of them. And he called a helpline, and he said this was in the days of dial phones, you'd put your finger in the hole and turn it around. He said if the last number had not been a number 1, he could not have finished dialing the number. And since he was an American in Canada, he had no health insurance, and he was not covered by Canadian health care, and he didn't have any money. There was only one place that would take him, and it was called Calais, which means the path. And it was a drug rehabilitation center, mostly for the First Nations, or what we call Native Americans. So there he was doing time, really. They had everyone there doing physical work all day long until they discovered that Phil was a writer, and they made him work in public relations, sitting at a desk. Well, it was not easy to leave this place, but because of who he was allowed to go into town. If he received mail, he could go in to reply to the mail or put a check in the bank account and so forth. So he plotted his escape along with a married couple who were First Nations people who also wanted to leave. So he went into town with the two of them, and the three of them never went back. And Phil had been corresponding with a professor at California State College, Fullerton, which is now University of California, Fullerton, Dr. Willis McNally. Phil sometimes jokingly called him Nellis McWillie. Anyway, Dr. McNally arranged for a place for Phil to stay, someone to pick him up at the airport. Well, the limousine could have been a hallucination, or it could have been real. I don't know. All I know is what Phil told me. So it was actually Tim Powers who picked Phil up at the airport. Linda Levy was with Tim, and she, when she tells it as if she all by herself picked up this strange man at the airport. No, she was with Tim Powers and possibly someone else, but I'm not sure. Anyway, they picked him up at the airport, and his suitcase was in such bad shape he had to tie it shut with a rope. And that was all he had, was one suitcase and the clothes on his back, which had been donated to Calais, used clothing, thrift shop stuff, and a Bible. Phil had a Bible in his hand, thinking that maybe he'd have less trouble with the authorities if he carried a Bible. So that's the story of how Phil got from San Rafael to Fullerton. He was definitely not going back to San Rafael after all that happened to him there. But he did not like Southern California. He called it plastic. And his metaphor for Southern California was the trash that collects in the gutters on the side of the road. And of course, Disneyland. The original Disneyland is in Orange County in Anaheim, California. But he eventually became comfortable enough. But being from Berkeley originally, after his mother spent some time in Washington, D.C., she moved him along with Phil to Berkeley. And so Phil's father, who was originally from Colorado, moved to Northern California to be near his son and have visitation. Yes, Freeman Kipple. So the stuff in the gutter and the plastic everywhere is Kipple. So in one of Phil's books, I forget which one, anyway, we had a love at first sight experience. But he eventually came to realize that whoever they were not after him anymore. And he blamed President Nixon for years, and then at some point he came to realize they were after Nixon too. Nixon got Watergated. But he still, for the whole time, the whole rest of his life, till he passed away in 1982, he wanted to find out what this SolarCon 6 was all about. Well, he wasn't really friends with Dr. Leary. He had a phone call from Timothy Leary, who was at the hotel in somewhere in Canada, with John Lennon and Yoko Ono and a bunch of other people, and they were recording Give Peace a Chance. And a journalist named Paul Williams, not the popular singer, different guy, happened to be at the hotel too. And both John Lennon and Timothy Leary were saying that they were big fans of this science fiction writer, Philip K.